Let's find out how humans invented bread. The ancient lands where rivers whispered secrets to the soil and winds carried the scent of earth. Humanity walked not with knowledge, but with curiosity. Long before the sharp blades of civilization carved their marks into the world. Long before the wheel rolled across dusty paths or metal met fire, humans lived by the rhythm of the sun and the hunger in their bellies. They roamed, foraged, hunted, and gathered, collecting berries, roots, and the wild grains that danced like golden flames in the breeze of untouched meadows. No one knew what bread was. No one even imagined such a marvel. Yet, beneath the surface of this innocence, the seed of invention had already been sown. It was during one of those eternal wanderings across the Fertile Crescent that an old woman, whose bones creaked like dry branches and whose eyes sparkled with the knowing of seasons, noticed something strange. The stalks of wild wheat, usually tough and bitter, had changed where fire had once kissed the field during a lightning storm. They had become dry and crisp, crackling with flavor, easier to chew. She bent down, took a handful, and chewed slowly. It was warm with the memory of flame. Her lips curled with understanding. That night she gathered more and offered it to her tribe. They munched quietly under a full moon, savoring the crunch, not knowing that they were tasting the earliest whisper of bread. But it wasn't until many moons later, when the skies grew jealous and rains drowned the earth, that the real accident happened. A young boy, too small to keep pace with the others, stayed behind in a rock shelter, hiding from a thunderstorm. He had with him a pouch of ground seeds, grains crushed between stones by his mother's patient hands. In the scramble, water had spilled into the pouch. The ground seeds, now wet, formed a thick paste. The boy, hungry and shivering, left the pouch near the fire to keep it safe. Sleep overtook him like a shadow. When he awoke, the paste had dried somewhat and had taken on a strange, spongy texture. He tasted it. It was different, soft, earthy. He didn't understand, but he knew it filled his belly better than dry seeds. And when he returned to his people, he told them of what had happened, not with words, but by showing the leftover lump in his hand. The tribe was skeptical. They laughed at first, dismissing the odd little cake. But hunger is a harsh teacher, and soon they tried the strange mash themselves. They began to experiment, mixing ground seeds with water, letting them sit, sometimes near fire, sometimes under the sun. Each batch yielded something new, sometimes bitter, sometimes sour, sometimes wonderfully chewy. They had no word for it. They called it only the warm grain, and it became a quiet treasure, passed from hand to hand, from generation to generation. One day, a woman left her mix out too long. It bubbled, frothed, alive with the invisible breath of wild yeast. At first she thought it had spoiled, but when she cooked it over stone, it rose like morning mist. The taste was richer, more complex, almost magical. That was the moment the wild spirit of bread was born, not in the flicker of invention, but in the patience of accidents repeated and learned from. In time, these early humans began to settle, lured by the convenience of not needing to chase after food every day. They planted grains intentionally. Wheat and barley, the same stalks their ancestors had once gathered wild, now grew in neat rows beside their huts. Fields replaced forests. Baskets replaced bare hands. Fire became more than a warmth. It became a tool, a partner. And in the heart of their homes, they began to dedicate flat stones to cook this mixture, this proto-dough, flattened into cakes, cooked quickly, and shared communally. As villages formed and the rhythm of life grew more predictable, each family had their own version of the grain mash. Some added crushed nuts. Others added dried fruits or herbs found nearby. Slowly, these differences carved the path toward diversity in bread making. What had once been a single discovery blossomed into endless forms, from flatbread to ash cakes, from seed loaves to the first forms of sourdough. The world of bread grew wider with every passing season. And yet the deeper meaning of bread was still forming. It was not just food anymore. It became memory, ritual, identity. Children were taught how to mix and knead before they could run. Women passed down not only the practice, but the feeling, the way dough should stretch and resist, how it should smell when it's ready, the way bubbles under the surface promise something soft and full of life. Men carried loaves on their journeys, breaking them with strangers who soon became brothers. Elders buried loaves with the dead, believing bread to be a bridge between worlds. In the heart of Mesopotamia, bread became sacred. The Sumerians, with their temples and tablets, began to record the process. They honored a goddess of grain, Nisaba, and believed that bread was her gift to mankind. In clay writings, they described ovens, recipes, types of flour. They knew by now that the longer dough rested, the lighter it became. They knew to use ash pits, fire domes, and eventually simple ovens made of stone and clay. Some households had special loaves for ceremonies, thicker, richer, sweeter. Others had daily bread, thin, plain, but warm and filling. Bread became currency. A worker's wage was sometimes paid in loaves. Bread became law. To steal a loaf was a sin not only against a person, but against the balance of society. Bread was peace and power. He who had bread had control. He who made bread shaped the story of his people. As centuries rolled by, Egypt refined the craft. There, the Nile offered fertile land, and grain grew in abundance. Egyptians built ovens into the earth, creating chambers where heat could rise evenly. They discovered fermentation, though they did not understand the invisible yeast. They believed it was the breath of the gods. Bread to them was more than nourishment. It was divine. Tombs were filled with loaves for the afterlife. Bakers were honored servants of pharaohs. Every meal, every ritual, every prayer found a companion in bread. Then came the Greeks and the Romans, who saw bread not only as food, but as a reflection of culture. They introduced grinding mills, fine sieves for flour, ovens with chimneys. Bread shops opened in bustling cities. Artisans competed for the lightest crumb, the richest crust. Recipes traveled with merchants and soldiers, across deserts, through mountain passes, over oceans. Bread spread like language, shifting, adapting, growing. Still in every bite there was memory. The echo of a boy who slept beside a fire, of a woman who forgot her dough until it frothed with life, of a tribe who dared to mix water and grain and wait. Even in the busiest Roman marketplace, even in the quiet hills of the Andes or the rice paddies of the East, the essence of that first moment remained. Humans, humble, hungry, creating something beautiful from what the earth gave free. Today, bread is everywhere, in baguettes and tortillas, in naan and pita, in rye loaves and sourdough, in sweet buns and flat wraps. But the story of its invention is not one of a single genius or a moment of brilliance. It is a tapestry of small accidents, shared memories, whispered instructions, and hands that never stopped kneading. From ashes and fire, from stone and seed, humans didn't just invent bread. They discovered a way to feed the body and the spirit. And in doing so, they took one of the first steps away from mere survival and toward civilization. From ashes and fire, from stone and seed, humans didn't just invent bread. They discovered a way to feed both body and spirit. What began as accidents and curiosity grew into tradition, culture, and connection. With each generation, The simple act of mixing flour and water carried the weight of memory, the warmth of home, and the promise of life. Bread became a symbol of survival and unity, present in times of peace and war, feast and famine. Across continents and centuries, its form changed, but its soul remained constant. A reminder that humanity's greatest creations often come not from invention alone, but from patience, need, and shared experience. In every loaf lies the story of those who once knelt by fire, trusting in grain and time. And so the journey of bread continues, not as a forgotten past, but as an eternal companion in the human story still rising with us. Thanks for watching. Please share this video.